So this morning, we continue our series of growing and leading ourselves whole, exploring what it means to cultivate beloved community, one that is healthy, whole, and rooted in our UU values, which we just demonstrated the heck out of our fifth principle. What is our fifth principle? Does anybody know?
Everyone has a vote?
Yes! We just sang it. Everyone has a vote. Everyone has a vote. Democracy is so important, so I'm so grateful that we just embodied one of our UU principles. This is the second in our series inspired by Growing a Beloved Community, 12 Hallmarks to a Healthy Congregation by Tom Owen Tolley. It's this book right here, and we do have some additional copies for anyone who might be interested in having them. Last month, we began Owen Tolley's vision of growing beloved community, a vision that was shaped by his experiences with Dr. King's teachings. During our MLK Day service, we explored the first two hallmarks of occupying holy ground and welcoming all souls. We reflected on how anywhere we stand can be sacred ground, whether it's in the sanctuary or in a grocery store aisle, knowing that our lives are enriched when we recognize the sacred in the everyday. The second chapter builds upon this, urging us to move beyond mere inclusion and practice radical hospitality by welcoming, not just with words, but with our whole hearts. It's an affirmation of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, an invitation to be fully present with one another. These themes led us naturally to today's hallmark of caring for our own and giving everyone a voice. So if last month's message was about opening our doors, today's message is about what happens once people walk through them. How do we truly care for one another? How do we ensure that every voice is heard, honored, and uplifted? And so today we did a lot of that by practicing consensus voting and really inviting everyone present to participate and say, how do you like to be cared for in this community? What kinds of practices are important to you? And then some folks started to ask, well, and how can we know the logistics of that? One of the quotes that was mentioned at the start of the service, that we are a covenanted people bound together by our shared humanity, pledging to walk side by side with compassion and accountability. These words are both an invitation and a challenge. They ask us not to just celebrate when community is easy, but to commit even when it's hard, even when it takes time. Time that you feel you don't have, time that you're anxious to get through. Caring for one another, it takes time. Listening to each other, it takes time. Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker, former president of Star King School for the Ministry, my alma mater, shout out to Star King, she speaks directly to this sacred responsibility, saying, quote, "We are all called to be persons who respond to the world with generosity, caring, and commitment, seeking to know what needs to be done and doing it. So writing down a list in front of everybody gives everybody the opportunity to see what everybody needs in order to feel cared for. And then just in seeing that list and hearing that list, it gives everybody an invitation to show some form of care, even if it's just expressing gratitude, because that was one of the 4 primary methods of caring in this community. Shout out to Laura for listing that. Caring for our own means recognizing that community is not just about showing up on Sundays. It's a covenantal relationship, a commitment to be present for one another in life's highs and lows. In a culture that often prioritizes individualism, choosing to care deeply for one another is a radical act. Following up on an email, shout out to Lynn for mentioning that, and sharing resources, taking time to follow up on when someone asks for a request outside of your day-to-day care, outside of the care that you're used to giving on a Sunday, when you just maybe feel full, like, oh, today is that day. It can also be in other days. When we care for one another, we resist the forces that isolate and divide us and become hope bearers, reminding one another that no one has to struggle alone. I'm passing over a really cute story, but I'm like, okay, I don't have to tell this story. I do want to share this quote by Reverend Victoria Safford, who describes the work that we do in caring for one another as a work of resistance and of hope. It is work of sustaining one another when despair is close at hand and summoning forth wholeness in the midst of brokenness. When we come together like we did today and listen to each other, that is us summoning forth wholeness in the midst of brokenness, all the things that are happening outside, not just this congregation, because, many of us are impacted by the things that's going on in the world every day and every moment of our lives. But when we come together, we are doing the work of resistance and hope simultaneously. This kind of care extends beyond individual acts of kindness. It also shapes how we make the decisions together. As a part of this commitment, UUCT is rebuilding and reimagining our care team. And as I mentioned earlier, all are invited to be a part of this renewed effort. It has been suggested, as I mentioned, that we have monthly potlucks, not just as a social event, but as a way to check in with one another and strengthen our bonds. Another idea that was mentioned is placing care cards at each seat, offering people a way to request and offer support. Knowing that these small steps remind us that care is not just a feeling, it is a practice, a discipline, a way of being in community. Caring for our own means ensuring that no one is forgotten, and giving everyone a voice means that no one is silenced. Reverend William G. Sinkford, former president of the Unitarian Universalist Association and the first Black UU president, once said that giving voice to the voiceless is a part of our calling, but even more so, listening to the voiceless that have been ignored is where our faith is tested. It is easy to listen to voices that confirm what we already believe. It's much harder to listen to voices that challenge us to grow, that challenge us to pause, to really think so that we can paraphrase what was said. There was a story from 1964 with Fannie Lou Hamer, who was a sharecropper, an activist, and a truth teller, who stood before the 1964 Democratic National Convention and testified about the brutal violence she endured simply for registering to vote. Her words back then were powerful, and they made people uncomfortable. At the time, President Lyndon Johnson, fearing the impact of her testimony, interrupted the broadcast with an impromptu press conference. I share this story because it reminds me of some of the kinds of tactics that some of our present-day leaders would use to try to interrupt someone's truth-telling. But as back then, Hamer's voice could not be silenced, and the next day her speech was re-aired across the nation, and people heard her truth, asking, quote, "Is this America?" she asked. "The land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off the hooks because our lives are being threatened daily because we want to live as decent human beings." Today, folks are dealing with things that are similar to this, but maybe it's not telephone ringing, maybe it's threads, maybe it's text messages, maybe it's the news headlines threatening lives daily. Is this America? Fannie Lou Hamer asked. Her testimony helped change the course of history, but only because people chose to listen. This is what we are called to do, not only in the world beyond these walls, but also right here in our congregation. So by this, I mean, who in our community might feel hesitant to speak in our spaces? Who in our congregation might not feel comfortable with sharing the care things that they need? How can we create space where discussion doesn't become about debating positions, but really about listening to one another's truths? As I prepare to close, I share that caring for our own and giving everyone a voice are not separate tasks. They're deeply intertwined. Reverend Julian Soto reminds us that all of us need all of us in order to make it. This is the essence of beloved community, recognizing that we are deeply interconnected, that our well-being is bound together, and that our wholeness depends on one another. And so after service today, when we gather for our congregational voting, and each time that we meet, may we listen, discern, and know how to make decisions as a community. To do this, I invite us to ask, how can we bring our deepest values into the way we engage? How can we make sure that every person, every voice matters in this moment? So let us always be open to begin again and again and again with love and inviting voices to be shared and care for our own. Amen.